Hey, I'm Max Materne, and I've spent my whole life in the power sports and marine industries, owning dealerships, operating in them, growing up through the ranks, working on them. Um, and then I consulted in the industry for the last 8 years. And most of that time I spent trying to identify the best way to make a profitable store and the most proficient store possible. And those things are really important. But what was left out from that was what's it like to be the customer in all of these situations? And how do we make for the best experience and keep them around and keep them as a part of our community along the way? And so for the last 3 years, I've spent all my time studying how we can make those life cycles better and what really defines ultimately a customer's life cycle. So I want to show you that today. This is a life cycle of a customer shown in months. This is a scale of 40 months, which is about 3.3 years, a little less than 3.5 years long. Now, obviously, every customer life cycle starts with a major unit purchase. That's what we see and how we track them in the data. We look at when they bought the unit and they bought their apparel the first time, and then when they finally come back for that first service. Now, in an ideal scenario, we have them coming back for their first annual service, their second annual service, and then an apparel replacement, which happens at around year 3, and then finally their third annual service. And this is kind of what we see as a full life cycle if we can keep the customer engaged the whole way around. Now, what we really see in the data when we start studying all of the customers that come through most stores' databases is that they build value along that first service and the obviously the purchase and that annual service, that first one. But then the value of that customer just flatlines and we don't see it increase anymore, meaning that we're not seeing that customer come back through. This could be because the customer's warranty expires at 24 months. This is all the on-road things that we studied. Or it could also be that the experience at that annual service was so bad that they don't want to come back at all. Either way, if we miss out on it, it means we're missing out on the annual service, that apparel replacement, and this third final annual service. And the worst part is that third service that we see is also the highest trade probability that we end up seeing in all the data. That means that the average customer just sticks around for this period of time. That's 1.1 years. And in order for us to get a customer to stay around long enough to trade the vehicle, we need them to stay 2.5 times longer than they currently stay with us. Now, I want to point out something really quickly, and that is the vehicle trade, why we think that trade is happening so often around that 40 months to that 3.5 years. And to do that, we need to look a little bit further into some financing details. Now, the majority of customers that we studied finance units for 60 months. That's a 5-year financing term. So if we look at things like their balance over time and their value over time, we can see their negative and positive equity position. Their vehicle trade takes place here. And as you can see, there's about 20% of the original purchase price as equity in that unit. So that means when we reach 40 months in a unit that's been financed for 60 months, we can use that 20% as a down payment and then start a new term on a brand new, even more expensive unit, but for the exact same monthly payment. So that allows us to start a whole new life cycle again. Now, let's just go back to the life cycle originally. The thing we really want to do is not just have the customer come in for that first annual service, but ideally we have them coming up and returning after every service and building more and more value. We don't need to guess at what this looks like because every single database we've studied has customers exactly like this, and we call this the loyal customers. These in the middle we call our neutral customers, and then there's another group of customers we call the vulnerable customers. That's the ones basically that purchase a major unit, purchase apparel, but they never return again. Each of these customers bring drastically different profitability. And the top 20%, which are those loyal customers, are 2.5 times as profitable as any other customer in the store. So that means we need to be able to identify who is the loyal customer. So I want to show you how we did that. In every database, every DMS, there's transactions that take place in 3 separate databases. There's sales, parts, and service. And of course, there are many, many transactions taking place at all times. So what we did was we took all these transactions and organized them by the consumer that came through, tens of thousands of customers. In order to best understand the actual life cycle, how long they've had the unit or where they bring in value, so we can have a clear definition of when it starts and ends, we started to break these transactions out based on the major units that they purchased. So we can now track the life cycle individually of each vehicle for each customer. Then we sorted them by highest life cycle value. And then we broke all of these customers into 3 subsets. Those subsets are the ones we call loyal, neutral, and vulnerable customers. Now, what's important about understanding these sets is that if we were to take the profitability of each of these and imagine that we just kind of have all of these customers as like individual slivers that we stack up next to each other, this is what that curve would look like. Now, most of the time we're talking about improving dealerships, improving customer experiences. We're doing so from the point of view of the average. We're looking at national averages and trying to compare ourselves to that, or regional averages, or our averages over the last couple of years. That's what we're trying to focus on. But the average customer is right in the middle of the pack here. And that's clearly not the most valuable customer that we have. The average customer is not important. It's this loyal customer we need to pay attention to. And this number is the one that we have created called enthusiast lifecycle value, the customer by customer value, to understand how we can make more loyal customers and improve their experience throughout all of this. So how do we do that? What can we do and what are we doing now? And to bring that up, I want to talk about marketing customers versus nurturing customers. So let's think yet again about the customer base, all those customers that you have right now. If you now could label them as loyal, neutral, or vulnerable, then basically target which ones you would want to communicate with. That's a great way to organize who we should talk to. But we also need to consider that in our data, the way we're pulling this is we're starting the life cycle of a customer at a major unit purchase. So what that means when we're looking at the data is that we're missing out on the customers who haven't yet bought a unit. So there are what we call just customers. So enthusiasts would be the ones that actually bought a major unit we can track. And then customers are the ones who bought some apparel or came in for a service. They did some sort of work, but we don't have any major unit attached to them. So we can't start a life cycle. Now, once we have this, we have these clear definitions of different types of customers. We can still zoom out even further and identify that we have actually prospects. These would be our leads. Like our sales department is talking to customers, trying to convince them to become a buyer, or our service department talking to customers about scheduling appointments that haven't yet been there. And then outside of prospects, there's our general market. So think about your manufacturers, your primary market area, right? These are the customers around your dealership that you can engage with. Now, when we market to customers, we spend marketing dollars. We're spending them from the outside in. We're trying to basically convince a customer from the general market that their life will be better if they come to our dealership. Then they're just a prospect. Then we have to get them through the sales process. Our salesperson has to convince them that it's the right thing to do to buy. And that's how we get them all the way through to hopefully one day becoming not just a purchaser of a unit, but a vulnerable, neutral, or most importantly, loyal customer. We spend lots and lots of money here, but what about if we took just a portion of that and we invested in the loyals? We don't have to spend all of our marketing dollars on those instead, but what if we just invested slightly more in the loyals than we did in just general marketing to outside customers? And if we did that, maybe we could grow the interior of our customer base, which would then grow all of our customer base from the inside out. So this idea is about nurturing customers rather than just marketing to new customers, focusing on the customers that we already have, giving them an even better experience. So then let's look at how do we actually nurture these customers. And to do that, I want to look back at this chart, the one where we see the life cycle over time. And I want you to consider this life cycle, the length of time that we have this customer. And we're going to take it and actually turn it into something that's a little bit easier for us to act on, and that is a clock. So in this clock now, we start at 0 months, then we go to 10 months, which would be, with 3 o'clock on the clock. At 6 o'clock, it's going to be 20 months, then 30 months. And then when we get all the way back around to the top of the clock or noon there, that would be our next major unit purchase, which again would lead to our very normal spots of the first service, the annual service, that next annual service, that apparel replacement, the things that we see in the data, they're showing up clearly. But we want to also make sure that we are spending enough time with these customers to fill in the rest of this clock. The best way to understand how to fill in the rest of the clock is to start by understanding the phases that these customers are going through. And I like to break the phases down by quarters. So the first quarter is the discovery phase. This is when the customer has just purchased the unit, right? It's a year or less. That means they haven't gone through all the seasons with it. They haven't had it for long enough to really get to know it perfectly. So they're still discovering what it's like to own. The next section, the next quarter is the engagement period. They're going to be spending more and more time with it, and they're re-engaging with us in that annual service. After that comes maturity. They're getting to know the unit a little more. They're getting very comfortable with it. They're in their third year at this point. And then finally, we end up in the evolution phase, which is where They've enjoyed it so much, but it's to a point where it might be time for the next one. So if we think about these phases and then start to consider how we can improve every single one of these hour marks on the clock, that's how we make this life cycle even better and keep the customer more engaged for a longer period of time. So let's start here at 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, we obviously have that customer coming back for the first service. So it's important to not only give them a great experience when they arrive, but make sure that leading up to it, they know where they're going. They know how they're going to engage with you. They've kind of been warmed up before they arrive, so they're comfortable. Remember, this is a discovery not just of their unit, but of you. Then what can we do at 2 o'clock? My opinion is this customer is now about 6 months into the ownership of their vehicle. So they're halfway through the first year, meaning they haven't gone through this season before. Maybe they bought it in the summer and now we're in the winter. This is the time that a parts department should be calling and talking about the accessories that would work great with this unit right now. Then let's get down to the 10-month mark. At this point, we're about to have them come back for that annual service. This is where we want to make sure we engage with them, right? That next annual service is the last time we see most customers. So to get the customer thinking about and talking about potentially buying that priority maintenance is key here to make sure that we can keep them for a longer period of time. This first annual service is where we really need to wow them, give an incredible experience. Then after that, we can re-engage them with service follow-ups, making sure they understand that we care about them, we're thinking about them, we want to make sure they're okay, if they need anything. Maybe all those things that we talked about or quoted that they didn't want to necessarily do, we ask them if they've thought about them, if they'd like to maybe have those installed now, any of those additional options. Now let's keep going to the 20-month mark. At this point, the customer's warranty is going to end in the next couple of months. So this is a perfect point to make sure we're calling about the extended service contract. Now, all of this side of the clock is easy because the customer, again, still has the warranty. They're kind of required to engage with us. We're seeing these customers show up. The really hard side of the clock is this side, because this is where the customer is almost 2 years old. We're not really thinking about them very much anymore. You're not pulling reports for those customers. You're not re-engaging them, but this is the most important side of the clock to work on. And I think the best way to re-engage a customer at this point is to make sure they feel like they're part of the community. So a personal invitation to the next event that's happening in the store, I think is something that should come from the sales department. The department who hasn't talked to them in, 23 months so far. Next, we have an annual service coming back. So we've warmed them up, we've gotten back them in the community and hopefully get them back for that service. At 30 months is a great opportunity for yet again, a service follow-up. Make sure we're engaging with them, everything went well, they're enjoying what we did. And then we've got what I believe would be a great sales department warm-up. This is the evolution phase. They're now starting to think about that next unit. And if that sales guy's still there that they worked with before, then let's just touch base and say hello. If they're not, then maybe introduce yourself as the new person. Hey, so-and-so's not here anymore. I just wanted to let you know I'm your point of contact in case you're ever interested in looking at another motorcycle. We know this is a point where they're starting to get the itch, starting to be more interested. So let's identify that time and start making those calls. Next is the apparel replacement. This is what's happening for most customers around 3 years. So making sure that parts department or that apparel department is reaching out to that customer yet again at this point and lining them up for that next major unit purchase. Now, this is a full life cycle, and this is a well-engaged life cycle. But what we need to consider is that every single life cycle is an individual customer. And within your database, you have tens of thousands of customers, all at completely different phases in their life cycle. So let's think about what we're doing when we market to customers. Right now, when we blanket market the same message to everyone, like I've seen on many websites right now, this 0% APR for 36 months. If you think about the life cycle those customers are in, very few of them are actually in the phase where this even matters. And if you think even further about all the customers that we have that are in that phase, not all of them are your loyals. So this really only applies and will only bring in a certain customer, a much smaller grouping of customers than I'm sure you're anticipating. Now, what if instead we completely change the way that we engage with individual customers and we start by identifying the loyal customers in your database? And then from there, we identify where in the life cycle each of these customers are. And that means that we're not just talking about engaging from a sales department because it's time to sell. This is about engaging from every department because it's an important moment in their life cycle to make sure that they stay engaged. The important thing I want you all to consider is that what is it that you can do right now, or what is it that your particular department can do to enhance that experience, to make sure that owner is having such a good time, they feel like such a part of the community that they want to do this over and over again. They want to stay a part of this community. They don't want to go buy some other toy or do something else because what experience we gave them didn't live up to what they expected it to be. So I believe the real important thing we should all be focusing on right now is improving that ownership experience. And if you want to join the conversation of the ownership experience and talk about how we can improve this, get more information on it, understand more of the study that we're creating, then follow all of this at onyx.io. Thank you for watching. As we learn more and study more, develop more, we're going to share this with you. And we ask you to do the same for us. So if you identify anything in your process that's making for a much better customer experience, more engaged customer, a more loyal customer, then let us know. If you're interested in learning more about your loyal customers and identifying exactly who those are, let us know. And you can do all that through onyx.io. So thank you so much, and we hope to work with you very soon.